The hood of the $500 Chevy jumped 6 inches when the tow tractor hit a pothole, and Celeste Harrow's phone caught what nobody in the junkyard was supposed to notice. Beneath the peeling orange paint, just ahead of the firewall, a white production stencil flashed in the sun. Celeste was still smiling into her live stream. 56-year-old Walt Keegan was signing the bill of sale beside his 9-year-old daughter when the hood fell shut again. Less than a day later, that video would be gone. The auction listing would be rewritten, and Celeste's lawyers would claim Walt had painted the stencil himself. At that moment, though, Celeste saw only a tired body man in a gray work shirt buying a truck her dealership had failed to sell 3 times. She turned her camera toward Walt, toward his daughter June, and toward the square cab 1969 Chevrolet C10 with its cracked windshield, bent front bumper, and bed full of rain-stained leaves. The local livestream had fewer than 300 viewers. Celeste needed something funny to keep them watching. Here's what happens when a man mistakes rust for opportunity, she told the phone. A few employees laughed because their chief executive was laughing. Walt looked at the title clerk, checked the vehicle identification number one last time, and signed beneath the words "complete vehicle." As is, where is? He paid $500 with money he had set aside for a used frame rack motor. Then he folded the receipt and put it in the metal case where he kept estimates, titles, and every promise that could cost him a week's pay. June heard the laughter. Her red hair was pulled through the back of a faded Cardinals cap, and she held Walt's old pocket flashlight in both hands. "Are you sure, Dad?" Walt studied the truck, not Celeste. The rear axle sat half an inch off center. 2 welds beneath the rocker were too disciplined for farm repair. The dashboard had 6 empty holes arranged in a pattern no radio had ever required. He did not know what those details meant yet. He knew only that someone had once built the truck to survive a force ordinary road use would never create. "No," he said, "that's why we document it before we guess." Celeste heard him and aimed the phone closer. "Document the weeds too. They may be the most valuable part." Walt asked the tow operator to stop. He photographed the C10 from all 4 corners. The auction number on the windshield, the closed hood, the bed, and the odometer. Then he photographed. Celeste's phone pointed at him. He did not know that choice would matter. He made it because 28 years straightening collision frames had taught him that metal remembered impact, but paperwork remembered ownership. The title clerk handed Walt a pink transfer receipt and a yellow removal slip. The paperwork named the truck by year, make, model, and identification number. No reservation, no parts exclusion, no clerical hold. Walt gave copies to the flatbed driver and kept the originals. When the C10 rolled through Harrow Auto Group's gate at 11:17 that Saturday morning, Celeste's live stream showed it leaving beneath the dealership sign. That was the irreversible moment. A legal sale had been completed, the truck had crossed the gate, and Celeste had recorded both facts herself. Celeste did not become concerned until the salvage manager caught her between 2 rows of trade-ins. Martin Vey had spent the morning trying to discuss the warehouse manifest. He reminded her that the C10 came from a storage company that had once handled motion picture property. No certificate or studio title had accompanied it, and the truck's ordinary identification number showed no special status. Celeste had heard all that on Friday and approved a $500 floor because the acquisition team wanted dead inventory gone. Now Martin said the buyer had photographed welds beneath the cab before leaving. Celeste opened her livestream replay, found the moment the hood bounced, and enlarged the pale lettering. Her expression changed, but not yet from guilt. It changed from a chief executive's irritation to the hard arithmetic of undisclosed risk. On Monday, Celeste's company was scheduled to certify its inventory representations to a regional buyer. 1 paragraph required disclosure of any asset dispute above $50,000 and any allegation that auction records had been changed. She could have called Walt then, explained the warehouse history, and requested a neutral examination. Instead, she told Martin to locate every old manifest and asked marketing to remove the replay until legal reviewed it. She considered that ordinary containment. The danger began when containment required the public record to say something it had not said at the gate. Walt's shop occupied the back half of an old tire warehouse on the south side of St. Louis. Keegan Collision and Frame had 1 lift, 1 paint booth he could no longer afford to heat every day, and a steel alignment table bought from a closing bus garage. Walt did good work. But insurance companies paid slowly and demanded photographs of everything. He had learned to make a file before he made a repair. June spent Saturdays at a small desk behind the parts counter. Her mother, Andrea, lived in Arizona and had not been able to keep regular custody after years of addiction treatment and unstable work. Walt never spoke against her. He kept every postcard Andrea sent and let June decide when she wanted them read aloud. Single fatherhood had not made him noble. It had made him careful about promises and tired in places sleep did not reach. Walt had once managed 6 technicians at a large collision center, but he left after the company began paying bonuses for repair speed without giving frame measurements equal weight. He had refused to release a minivan whose roof rail remained outside specification. The argument cost him the promotion that would have paid for private school and better health insurance. Opening his own shop gave him authority over his signature, but it also gave him a landlord, a tax account, and no corporate office to absorb a bad month. His competence had a boundary. He could read damaged structure, document a repair, and make a vehicle square again. He could not identify every rare machine, and he knew enough not to pretend otherwise. The $500 had been a risk. His frame rack motor had begun whining under load, and without that machine he could not take the larger jobs that paid the rent. But the Junkyard C10 carried a straight left frame rail, an undamaged steering box, and several period parts he could sell, even if the truck proved useless. Walt had done the arithmetic before lifting his bidder card. He had not bought a miracle. He had bought salvage with an unusual history written underneath it. Before unloading, Walt set 2 shop cameras to record continuously. He asked the flatbed driver to state the time, the auction lot number, and that nobody had opened the hood since leaving Harrow's yard. The driver shrugged, but cooperated. June held a measuring stick beside each dent while Walt took still photographs. When the truck reached the alignment table, he placed paper seals across the hood and doors and wrote the time over each edge. "Now, can we look?" June asked. "Now we can prove how it looked before we looked." He broke the hood seal on camera. The hinges complained, then the broad panel rose. The engine bay was mostly empty. An old small block remained between the rails, but its carburetor, radiator, and belts were gone. The white stencil sat exactly where the brief flash in Celeste's video had suggested. Though Walt had not seen the video yet, it read Unit 2, Sub-U Run, 81475. Below it, hidden by orange overspray, was the upper curve of a black number 7. June leaned toward it. "Is that a factory number?" "Not Chevrolet S." Walt kept his hands away. "And not fresh." He showed her the cracked paint crossing the letters. Rust had formed inside 2 old scratches that cut through both the orange top coat and the white stencil. Anyone could paint words on a truck. Nobody could make 40 or 50 seasons of expansion, oil mist, dust, and corrosion settle naturally around them in an afternoon. The other modifications made a stranger pattern. Triangular gussets reinforced the front crossmember. A second cable ran through the firewall beside the parking brake. Flat steel plates had been welded beneath both rocker panels, as if the truck had once been dragged sideways without folding. The 6 holes under the dashboard carried circular scars from a removed bracket. Behind the bench seat, Walt found 3 threaded mounts facing backward toward the bed. Those were not proof of value. They were proof of purpose. Walt called Roy Danner, a 71-year-old welder who had taught him framework when Walt was 19. Roy lived 30 miles west and still distrusted any measurement made with a battery. He arrived with a folding rule, a magnifying glass, and the same brown lunch thermos he had carried to the bus garage for 4 decades. Roy examined the gussets without touching the stencil. MIG welds but early wire. Same hand on all 4 corners. Whoever did it cared more about survival than beauty. "Race support truck?" Walt asked. Roy shook his head. "A support truck carries things. This one was expected to hit things." Under the right rocker, Roy found a narrow channel made for a removable skid shoe. Inside the bed, the wood floor had been replaced with steel, then covered again with worn boards. The backwards mounts behind the seat lined up with a camera position, not cargo. Roy wrote what he observed, signed and dated the page, and made Walt sign as witness. He offered no story. That restraint made his opinion useful. June had been unusually quiet. She sat at her desk with Celeste's auction clip open on a school tablet. A boy from her class had sent it with 3 laughing faces. The public clip ended just after Walt's purchase and already had 4,000 views. June watched it once with the sound off, then dragged the progress bar backward frame by frame. "Dad, come here." Walt saw Celeste's face, the comments climbing beside it, and himself standing in a work shirt that looked older on video. He wanted to close the screen. June stopped on the pothole, the hood lifted. For 11 frames, the production stencil was visible, sharper than it looked in the shop because direct sun crossed the firewall. "That number was there before we got it," June said. Walt did not answer immediately. He copied the public video link, took screenshots that included the time and account name, and downloaded the clip through the auction platform's share function. Then he recorded June's screen with his phone while the clip still played from Celeste's verified business account. At the bottom of the image, the yellow removal slip was already taped inside the windshield. The recording did more than show the stencil. It fixed the mark, the truck, and the completed sale in one frame. The comments beneath the clip taught Walt another lesson about evidence. Some viewers called him a fool. Others claimed they knew the truck from television, though they named 3 different movies. One wrote that the stencil proved a military prototype. Another insisted it was a county road truck. Walt saved the page but believed none of them. Popular certainty could contaminate a search as easily as corporate pressure could. He asked June not to answer anyone and emailed her teacher before Monday, explaining that a business video included her image without consent. The teacher offered to keep June home from a class presentation. June refused. "If I stay home, they'll think the laughing part was the whole story," she said. Walt let her go, then spent the afternoon wondering whether courage and exposure had begun to look too much alike. Walt called the dealership and asked for the original livestream to be preserved. The marketing assistant transferred him twice. Then Celeste answered. "You found a stencil," she said. Her voice carried none of the afternoon's amusement. "That does to make scrap valuable. I did to say it did. I'm asking you to preserve the video and listing why, because they record the vehicle at transfer." Celeste paused. "Mr. Keegan, you bought a non-running truck for parts. If you are preparing some kind of publicity stunt, our legal department will respond." Walt wrote down her words. "Please send that in writing." The call ended. 7 minutes later, the clip returned an unavailable message. By evening, the listing no longer said complete vehicle. A gray banner called it a body shell sold for dismantling, with non-conforming material excluded. Walt refreshed the page twice, then stopped. He had already saved the original PDF with its creation time. The change did not frighten him as much as Celeste intended. It told him the truck mattered to someone who had better records than he did. Inside Harrow's headquarters, the record change did not happen with a dramatic order. It happened through a sequence of small permissions. Legal asked cataloging whether the lot description reflected the intended sale. Cataloging asked Martin what had been in the truck. Martin answered that no one had inventoried the modifications. Celeste wrote, "Clarify shell only pending reconciliation." A web administrator copied those words into the live page. Each person touched one corner of the decision, which made it easier for everyone to tell themselves nobody had rewritten history. When Martin objected that the signed removal slip named a complete vehicle, Celeste told him the acquisition protected 200 jobs. She was not lying about the jobs. She was using a real responsibility to excuse a false record. At 8:20 that night, a letter arrived by email from Harrow Auto Group's counsel. It said an inventory reconciliation had identified historic media production equipment mistakenly attached to the C10. The company demanded return of the vehicle by noon Monday in exchange for a full refund and $1,000 for towing. If Walt refused, Harrow would seek emergency possession and damages for conversion. June read his face from across the kitchen table. "Can they take it? They can ask a judge. What are you going to do?" Walt looked at the frame rack invoice, held to the refrigerator by a magnet. The motor deposit was due Monday. Returning the truck would give him $1,500, enough to keep the shop moving. Refusing could freeze the C10, bring legal bills, and cost him jobs he was already struggling to finish. He turned the auction receipt so June could see it. "First, we make sure we rewrite. Then we decide what being right is worth." He did not tell her that he was afraid. He called a lawyer named Denise Calder, whose sedan he had repaired after a winter collision. Denise handled small business disputes, not movie artifacts. but she understood emergency orders and electronic records. Walt offered to pay her standard rate. She told him what that would cost. He removed the frame rack invoice from the refrigerator and placed it face down. Deanie sent a preservation notice to Harrow Auto Group, the auction platform, the livestream contractor, and the dealership S outside marketing agency. It identified the listing: the video, the account, the truck, and the exact time window. It requested server copies, edit histories, captions, engagement logs, and all communications concerning deletion. By 10:30, the people who controlled the missing video had been formally told not to destroy it. Andrea called before midnight. Someone had sent her Celeste S clip, and fear sharpened her voice before Walt could explain. She asked why June had been placed beside a junk truck while strangers mocked them. Walt's first instinct was to defend the purchase. Instead, he admitted that he had underestimated the camera. Andrea had made mistakes large enough to shape their family, but that did not make every concern she raised wrong. She asked to speak with June, and Walt waited in the hall while mother and daughter talked privately. Afterward, Andrea told him she supported protecting the sale if it was lawful, but she did not want June turned into evidence or channel content. Walt promised she would not be. That promise later cost him the easiest witness in the case, which was exactly why it mattered. Then Walt began looking for call run. He did not search for a price, he searched library catalogs, scanned trade magazines, and old film production directories. The first useful result came from a 1976 issue of American Stunt Monthly preserved by a university archive. A short article described a fictional motion picture called Crosswind Run, filmed around Missouri and southern Illinois in the summer of 1975. The movie's 18-minute chase finale featured two nearly identical orange Chevrolet pickups. Unit 1 handled close shots. Unit 2, reinforced and fitted with remote camera mounts, performed a bridge approach, a controlled rollover, and a collision through a produce stand. The article included a grainy photograph. Most of the truck was hidden behind 3 crewmen, but the hood was open. On the firewall sat a pale rectangle of writing. June read the caption. They called it Unit 2. Walt nodded. Though he kept his excitement under control, a magazine caption could be wrong. 2 trucks could carry similar marks. Crosswind Run had become a cult American road film after television reruns in the 1980s. But studio stories grew larger each time somebody repeated them. Walt needed measurements, not nostalgia. He contacted the Midwestern Motion Picture Archive listed beneath the article. Its vehicle historian, Dr. Helen Sloan, answered Sunday morning. She did not congratulate him. She asked for the wheelbase, frame stamping, cab build date, weld photographs, windshield shape, and every visible layer of paint. Walt sent a numbered photo log, Roy S. observations, and a copy of the unaltered sale listing. He withheld the production stencil close-up at first and asked whether the archive had Unit 2 records that could be tested independently. Helen respected the question. She found a surviving stunt coordinator S notebook in a collection donated 14 years earlier. The notebook described 6 modifications: 4 front gussets, paired rocker plates, a passenger side skid channel, rear-facing camera mounts, a secondary brake cable, and a steel bed under false boards. Walt's truck had all 6. More important, the notebook recorded a repair after the produce stand collision. The right rear bed support had been replaced with angle iron carrying 5 torch cuts, the third one longer than the others. Walt crawled beneath the bed with Roy and 2 cameras running. The angle iron was there. 5 cuts crossed its edge. The third was nearly twice as long. That was their first measurable match, and it changed the problem. They no longer had an odd truck with a suggestive stencil. They had a vehicle whose hidden structure matched a record unavailable to the public. Walt tested the match against alternatives before accepting it. Roy searched period municipal upfit manuals and found no public service package using that skid channel. Helen checked 2 replica clubs and confirmed that photographs of the stunt notebook had never been published. The cab identification number matched a Chevrolet assembled early enough to be on set, and an old registration search showed no road use after September 1975. None of those facts authenticated the truck alone. Together, they eliminated the simplest competing explanations: a farm modification, a later fan replica, or a production mark copied from public material. Helen still refused to authenticate it remotely. She requested paint samples taken by an independent conservator, high-resolution imaging of the frame number, and a physical comparison with continuity photographs stored on film negatives. She could travel Thursday if the truck remained undisturbed. Thursday was too late for Celeste. Harrow Auto Group was scheduled to sign the sale of 3 dealerships to a regional chain on Friday. Denise learned that fact from the company's public lender notice. Any unresolved claim involving altered auction records had to be disclosed before closing. Celeste was not fighting only for a truck. She was fighting a clock that could move millions of dollars into escrow. That did not make her innocent, but it made her behavior understandable. The C10 had entered Harrow's inventory through a studio storage liquidation bought in bulk from a warehouse owner. Celeste had delegated cataloging to a contractor, approved hundreds of lots, and treated an old truck as scrap. Once a former studio insurer asked whether Unit 2 had surfaced, she faced a title problem, an acquisition disclosure, and a humiliating video in which she had advertised her own lack of care. On Sunday afternoon, Celeste came to Walt's shop without a camera. She brought her counsel and a written offer. Harrow would pay Walt $25,000, replace his frame rack motor, reimburse Denise, and withdraw every accusation. In return, Walt would rescind the sale, transfer the C10, delete his copies of the livestream, and sign a confidentiality agreement preventing June from discussing the auction. The offer was enough to save the shop. It was also the first credible chance Celeste had taken to correct the transaction without force. Walt asked for 15 minutes alone and stood beside the dead frame rack. $25,000 would replace the motor, cover 2 months of rent, and leave enough to repair the shop roof before winter. He imagined telling June that the dispute was over and that no reporter would ever call. Then he read the agreement again. It required him to state that Harrow had never sold the truck's historic content, even though the identified vehicle and every attached modification had crossed the gate as one object. It also transferred all copies of the video back to Harrow. The offer did not merely purchase the C10, it purchased Walt's agreement that the original transaction had never happened. "You'll be made whole," she said, "more than whole." Walt read every page. "Why does the agreement say the original listing was inaccurate?" "Because it was changed after I called." Her counsel interrupted. "That's a disputed characterization." Walt pointed to the confidentiality clause. "And why is my daughter named?" Celeste looked through the office window at June's desk. "Because children repeat things they don't understand, and the internet rewards damage." That criticism found its mark. June had shared a screenshot with one friend. By Sunday, classmates knew her father was the junk truck man. Walt had brought her to the auction, allowed her into the discovery, and failed to protect her from becoming part of Celeste's content. Celeste was wrong about the sale, but she was right that Walt's choices had exposed June. He could have accepted the money and called it protection. Instead, he crossed out the paragraph naming June and wrote a different proposal in the margin. Harrow could acknowledge the original listing, preserve the video, withdraw the fraud claim, and submit ownership to neutral review. Walt would agree not to publish Celeste's personal information or encourage harassment. He would not surrender the truck or erase the record. Celeste stared at the edits. "You risking your business for an old pickup you cannot even prove is real." "I am risking it because you want my daughter bound to a lie." Celeste gathered the papers. "Then tomorrow a judge can decide what your principles are worth." After she left, June asked whether he had turned down $25,000. Walt said he had turned down the conditions, not the money. The distinction did not fix the frame rack. Monday morning, its motor failed with a customer's delivery van clamped above the table. Walt paid another shop to finish the alignment, refunded part of the job, and lost the fleet account for the rest of the month. That was the cost of his midpoint choice. It was not noble in the moment. It was a grinding noise, an embarrassed phone call, and a balance in his business account that dropped below rent. Harrow filed for emergency replevin, claiming the truck contained mistakenly transferred studio property and that Walt's restoration skills created a risk of alteration. Denise answered with the bill of sale removal slip. Original listing, video screenshots, Roy's signed observations, and Walt's continuous shop recordings. She did not ask the court to declare the truck worth millions. She asked the court to preserve possession and evidence until ownership could be heard properly. At Tuesday's hearing, Celeste's counsel made the strongest case available. A $500 buyer should have known a historically important production vehicle was not contemplated by a salvage sale. The listing change, counsel said, corrected a mistake. Walt's background in metalwork gave him both motive and ability to create markings. Harrow requested that the C10 be moved to a bonded warehouse controlled by neither party. The judge did not give either side a victory. He ordered the truck sealed in a neutral evidence facility, prohibited alteration, required Harrow to produce the original listing history and livestream files, and scheduled a full evidentiary hearing for Friday morning. Walt retained title and constructive possession, but the truck left his shop behind a bonded carrier. June stood inside the office as it was loaded. It feels like they won. Walt watched the orange roof disappear beyond the gate. It feels like we haven't proved it yet. The neutral warehouse, charged by the day. Denise required Harrow to advance the fee, but Walt remained responsible if the court later decided he had acted in bad faith. He also had to close his shop for 4 hours while the carrier documented removal. 2 customers saw the orange truck leave behind a court seal, and by afternoon one had canceled a restoration estimate. The loss was not caused by a judge or by Celeste directly. It came from uncertainty, the kind that makes ordinary people step back until a powerful dispute chooses a winner. He had made 3 consequential choices by then. He had bought the truck after recognizing structural work. He had refused a profitable silence that would include his daughter. Now he made the hardest one. Dennis said June's screen recording and memory could establish that Celeste's public clip had shown the stencil. Walt refused to put a 9-year-old on a witness stand or let the dealership's lawyers question her about school messages. Her recording is evidence, Denise said, and she noticed the frame. Use the file, not the child. That may leave us without a clean authentication witness. Then we find an adult record. Protecting June made the legal path narrower. It also changed how June saw him. She had wanted to help. At first, she heard only that he did not trust her. Walt sat beside her desk and admitted the truth. He trusted her enough not to make her pay for an adult's decision. But she put me in the video already, June said. That was her choice. What happens next is mine, while Denise pursued the court order. Walt and Helen built the physical case. At the bonded warehouse, an independent paint conservator took microscopic samples from 4 protected edges. The layers were consistent across the cab and firewall. Factory green, gray primer, a dark movie maroon, white production stencil, then orange overspray, followed by decades of oxidation. The stencil existed beneath paint applied long before Walt owned the truck. Its age could not be narrowed to a single year, but its position in the layer stack defeated the claim that he had added it after Saturday. Helen arrived with high-resolution scans of 36 continuity negatives. She placed no faith in the obvious details. Orange paint and a white number could be copied. She looked for damage nobody would choose as decoration. One negative showed Unit 2 after the produce stand collision. The left edge of the hood carried a shallow crescent dent. 2 bolts on the driver's side hinge sat at different angles. A weld bead beneath the cab ended in a hook-shaped crater. The recovered C10 matched all 3. Another image, taken before the bridge approach, showed a chalk mark under the hood. 7B followed by a diagonal slash. Infrared photography at the warehouse revealed the same black 7 and slash beneath the orange overspray. The archive match established identity. It still did not establish market value. For that, Denise insisted on 2 independent appraisers with no buyer's interest. One specialized in documented movie vehicles, the other handled historically significant American trucks. They considered the fictional film's continuing audience, the C10's principal use in the chase finale, the survival of original reinforced structure, the loss of Unit 1 in a studio fire, the incomplete engine bay, and the cost of conservation. Their preliminary ranges overlapped between 1.8 and 2.35 million. The higher number depended on the original camera bracket and stunt log being reunited with the truck. Walt did not celebrate the range. An appraisal was an opinion, not a check. The truck could be valuable and still belong to someone else. He needed Celeste's deleted recording for the title promise to become complete. The video had to show the decisive markings before transfer and before any alleged alteration. The auction platform produced engagement logs but claimed the video file had been deleted by the account administrator. Its system kept only short transcodes after 30 days. Harrow's marketing agency produced an edited promotional clip with the hood moment removed. Celeste's counsel argued that no complete original remained. Denise read the production agreement twice. The livestream had included a sponsor banner for Gateway Community Bank. Sponsored broadcasts were routed through a compliance encoder that inserted disclosures and retained raw feeds for 90 days. The bank had no role in the dispute, but its advertising vendor did. Denise served the Court-S production order on the vendor Wednesday afternoon. The response arrived Thursday at 6:12 p.m. The vendor held a 48-minute master file, a stream manifest, and a cryptographic hash created automatically when the broadcast ended. The file could be authenticated without Celeste, without June, and without trusting a reposted clip. It was the adult record Walt had promised to find. The record's custodian explained the system in language Denise could use. The encoder created small segments every few seconds, numbered them in order, and wrote a manifest describing the sequence. At the end of the broadcast, it calculated a digital fingerprint for the master. A changed frame would produce a different fingerprint. The archived file matched the fingerprints stored on the sponsor report generated Saturday morning. The file was therefore not simply a copy someone had emailed after the dispute. It was the same broadcast the sponsor-S system had received while the auction was occurring. There was more. The master began 6 minutes before the public broadcast. In those private minutes, Celeste walked with her salvage manager past the C10. The manager told her the warehouse consignor had mentioned some old movie modifications, but that no documentation had been found. Celeste replied that the truck had failed reserve twice and told him to mark it complete. No exceptions, so the Saturday event would be rid of it. Her statement did not prove she knew the C10's identity. It proved she knowingly chose a complete sale, despite hearing that unusual modifications might exist. Her later claim that historic equipment had been excluded was not a forgotten term. It was a term created after the result became expensive. Denise called Celeste's counsel and offered one final off-ramp before the Friday hearing. Harrow could concede the sale. Correct the listing history, withdraw the fraud accusation, pay documented legal and storage costs, and preserve the original video. In return, Walt would agree to a factual joint statement and would not seek punitive damages. Celeste had a chance to correct course. With the decisive evidence in front of her, she refused. The dealership sale was due to close that afternoon, and a concession would trigger the buyer's integrity clause. She chose to argue that the private pre-roll was privileged corporate communication, and that the sponsor archive could not prove the condition of components hidden beneath the hood. Friday's hearing took place in a county courtroom with 40 wooden seats, not a polished auction hall. 3 local reporters attended because Harrow's acquisition had already been announced. Walt wore the same navy work jacket he used when meeting insurance adjusters. June stayed at Roya's house, where she could watch old baseball games and remain outside the case. Walt carried her Cardinals cap in his document case anyway. Celeste sat behind her counsel with the dealership buyer's compliance officer 2 rows back. Her goal was no longer to make Walt look foolish. It was to keep the transaction uncertain long enough to close her company sale. She appeared composed, and for part of the morning, her lawyers made reasonable points. Movie vehicle authentication involved judgment. Old trucks were altered for racing, farm work, and exhibitions. A production stencil could identify a component rather than the entire vehicle. Preliminary appraisals did not transfer title. The court first addressed whether the video could be used. Harrow challenged the sponsor vendor's collection method and suggested the pre-roll captured internal conversation beyond the public stream. The judge allowed the master for the limited purposes of timing, condition, and notice, while reserving questions about legal privilege. That narrow ruling prevented the case from turning into theater. Denise could not use every careless word to attack Celeste's character. She could use the frames showing the truck, the sale, the hood, and the decisions Harrow had made about the lot. Walt agreed with each limitation when Denise questioned him. He did not call himself a historian. He explained frame deformation, weld sequence, and why he had stopped work. He admitted he bought the C10 expecting parts value. He admitted the $500 had been a calculated gamble. His credibility grew because he did not claim more than his hands had shown him. Roy explained the welds. The conservator explained the paint layers. Helen explained the private stunt notebook and the 6 hidden modifications, then placed the continuity images beside photographs taken under court seal. Plate to plate, dent to dent, cut to cut, the physical matches accumulated. The judge could see the truck's identity without understanding movie folklore. Then Denise played Celeste's video. The sponsor vendor's hash appeared first, followed by testimony from its records custodian. The master file rolled from the private pre-broadcast minutes into the public stream without a cut. Celeste's own voice filled the courtroom. Market complete, no exceptions. The auction followed. Walt's $500 bid, the laughter. June holding the flashlight, the signed receipt visible in the clerk's hand. The yellow removal slip placed behind the glass. At the pothole, Denise froze the image. The hood rose. Sunlight crossed the firewall. Unit 2 TW Run 81475 appeared in white beneath a web of old cracking. The upper black 7 sat below it. In the same frame, the auction clock showed the sale complete. Walt stood several feet away with both hands visible. He had not yet touched the hood. Denise advanced 11 frames and stopped on the clearest one. Helen placed a 1975 continuity photograph on the evidence screen beside it. The white lettering occupied the same position. The crescent hood dent broke the same reflection. The mismatched hinge bolts pointed at the same angles. The black 7 matched the infrared image beneath the later orange coat. Celeste's counsel argued that the video proved only markings, not value. That is correct, Helen said. The archive, construction, paint sequence, continuity damage, and surviving production records establish identity. The video establishes that those features were present while Harrow controlled and sold the vehicle. The independent market reports address value. No single item does all 3 jobs. That answer made the chain stronger than any dramatic declaration could have. Trigger, hidden construction, independent archive, physical testing, counterclaim, raw video, market review. Each piece had a limited purpose, and together they left no missing bridge. The final issue was ownership. Harrow's counsel asked the court to rescind for unilateral mistake. Denise showed that the listing described a complete vehicle. Celeste had approved no exceptions. The salvage manager had warned of movie modifications, and Walt had paid and removed the identified truck. A seller's failure to investigate an openly transferred asset did not create a hidden reservation after value appeared. More damaging still, Harrow had changed the listing and deleted the public video after receiving a preservation request. The judge denied Harrow's claim for possession and declared the bill of sale effective as written. He ordered the bonded facility to release the C10 to Walt, required Harrow to pay storage and reasonable legal fees under the auction's prevailing party provision, and preserved Walt's right to pursue sanctions for altered records. He also directed the clerk to send the video deletion evidence to the State Motor Vehicle Commission, which governed dealer record-keeping. The ruling did not make Walt a millionaire that morning. It did something more important first. It named the truck as his property and named the altered record as the company's responsibility. The compliance officer for Harrow's buyer stepped into the hall before Celeste did. Under the acquisition agreement, the record-keeping referral, an undisclosed claim, triggered an automatic holdback. $12 million of the purchase price moved into escrow pending audit. The buyer did not cancel the acquisition or fire every employee. It required an independent review, removed Celeste from control of dealer auctions during that review, and appointed the company's operations chief to certify every pending listing. Martin, the salvage manager, kept his job and gave the auditors the Friday email in which he had mentioned the production history. The web administrator kept hers because the audit found she had followed an approved change request and preserved the database log. Responsibility did not spread equally merely because many hands touched the record. The review traced who knew what, when they knew it, and who had authority to stop. That precision mattered to Walt. He had never wanted 200 employees punished for their chief executive's refusal to admit an expensive mistake. The State Commission later imposed a civil penalty, required corrected auction records, and suspended Celeste's individual dealer auction authority for 9 months. The consequence did not come from mocking Walt. Rudeness was not a licensing offense. It came from changing a material listing, making a false exclusion claim, and deleting a business record after formal notice. Outside the courtroom, Celeste found Walt beside a stone bench. Without the livestream phone between them, she looked less powerful and more exhausted. "You could have taken the 25,000, she said. "Yes. You could have shown us the archive work before involving the court. I offered neutral review, you filed for the truck." She looked through the glass doors toward the reporters. "That video will follow me longer than the ruling." Walt thought of June watching classmates turn her father into a joke. A camera does decide who deserves shame. It records who did what. Celeste gave a tired nod. It was not an apology, and Walt did not pretend it was. Before leaving, she told him the warehouse consignor had found a crate bearing the same production code. It remained outside the sale and belonged to the consignor, but she had instructed counsel to preserve it and contact Helen. For the first time, Celeste chose documentation before control. It did not erase what she had done. It showed she understood the rule she had violated. The C10 returned to Walt's shop that afternoon. June ran her hand above the orange fender without touching it. "So it is worth $2 million? Two appraisers think it may be, under the right sale and after final authentication. That is the same as having $2 million. Walt smiled. Exactly. He had three options. A private collector offered $25 million, contingent on immediate cosmetic restoration and exclusive ownership of the story. A streaming studio offered more for promotional use, but wanted the truck repainted to look clean on camera. The Midwestern Motion Picture Archive could not match those numbers. But a preservation foundation proposed a $1 million purchase funded by donors. Walt would receive the money over a documented closing. Roy and Helen would supervise conservation. And the truck would remain on public display with its dents, welds, and evidence history intact. The private offer would have paid fastest. Walt's shop was behind on rent. His frame rack was dead. And June's future deserved more than principle displayed behind glass. Yet, restoring the truck into a shiny fiction would destroy the paint layers and marks that had protected them. He asked June what she thought, careful not to make a child responsible for adult money. She looked at the freeze frame printed on the workbench. If they make it pretty, will people still see what the video saw? That question clarified the final choice. Walt accepted the foundation proposal after Denise secured payment guarantees, education funds for June, public access terms, and credit for every documented contributor, including Roy. A portion of the money retired the shop's debt and bought a new frame system. Another portion funded an apprenticeship in collision measurement for older workers displaced by shop closures. Walt kept enough to make June safe without teaching her that safety required selling the record of what happened. The final valuation closed at $1 million. It was not based on a stencil alone. It rested on provenance, unique construction, continuity matches, the survival of the principal stunt truck, the fictional film's cultural market, independent appraisals, and the clean chain of title established in court. Celeste's video had supplied the irreplaceable link, proof of those visible features before Walt took possession, and proof that Harrow had sold the complete truck. Andrea attended the closing by video. She congratulated June first and Walt second. Part of the purchase proceeds went into a protected education trust that neither parent could borrow from. Walt suggested that future visitation travel be paid from his share. Not June's trust. The conversation was practical, sometimes awkward and more hopeful than any family speech could have been. The truck did not repair Andrea's life or erase the years Walt had carried alone. It gave them enough room to make the next promise without attaching desperation to it. 3 months later, the C10 entered the Archive-S Conservation Hall. Nobody polished the orange paint. The leaves came out of the bed, active rust was stabilized, and unsafe fluids were removed, but the crescent hood dent remained. Roy fabricated no replacement parts. He helped mount the truck so visitors could see the rocker plates and the 5 torch cuts beneath the bed. Walt stood near the exhibit while technicians adjusted a screen. The display did not replay Celeste's humiliation of him. At his request, it began with the pothole and ended before June's face appeared. The screen then showed the 1975 photograph, the paint layers, the stunt notebook, and the courtroom authenticated frame. June's discovery was credited in one simple line. A 9-year-old viewer noticed the production mark in the seller's original video. June read it twice. "You left my name off. You can add it when you re-old enough to choose." She considered that, then took the red Cardinals cap from her head and set it on his. It was too small and sat high above his ears. Roy laughed from beneath the truck. Walt left it there. When the first public visitors entered, an older man stopped beside the C10 and told his grandson he remembered seeing Crosswind run at a drive-in. He pointed not to the bright paint or the movie poster, but to the plates under the rocker. He explained that somebody had built the truck to take a hit and keep its shape. Walt listened from several feet away. That was close enough to the lesson he wanted preserved. Near closing time, June asked for Walt's phone. She stood at the marked viewing line and framed the truck carefully. The hood was raised at the same 6-inch angle captured in Celestia's stream. The white production stencil caught the museum light. June checked that no visitor's face was visible, then took one photograph. "What's that one for?" Walt asked. She handed the phone back. "Condition at transfer." Walt looked at the picture, then at his daughter. He saved it in a new folder with the date and her initials. Outside the glass wall, evening settled over the city. Inside, the battered orange truck remained exactly what the evidence said it was. Not a miracle, not a revenge trophy, and not a joke somebody rich had outgrown. It was a working object whose scars had survived long enough to speak, because a father and daughter had known when to stop guessing and start keeping the record.